Well, let's bring in Daniel Wild, Deputy Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs. Daniel, let's start in Melbourne. Property prices are stalling, with nearly every other capital city overtaking Melbourne in terms of monthly growth. Indeed, monthly growth went backwards in Melbourne, and the annual growth is just 1.1%. Now, some will try to look at this in a positive light. They'll say housing prices in Melbourne are getting more affordable, but that's a fairly simplistic take on this issue. Explain why.
Well, it is simplistic. This is an impending sign of economic collapse. And the reason for that is demand is still getting pumped up with mass migration into Melbourne. So it's not as if, yes, if they had to cut numbers coming into the city, sure, you'd say this is alleviating housing affordability, maybe a positive sign. But this is being driven fundamentally by two key things. The first is the massive cost associated with the construction of housing, so investors are not getting in there. And secondly, the general economic circumstances, whether it's taxes or regulation. We know businesses are leaving the state in record numbers. It's the only state in Australia with a negative outflow of new businesses. So they know what's coming down the pipeline. People are leaving, investors are leaving because of the tax that is coming on, property investors. So this is a very worrying sign for the future economy in Victoria.
Oh, absolutely. And we know landlords are selling. There was a report in the Herald Sun that 1 in 4 landlords had sold a property in a single year. And those property taxes, the soaring land tax, the stamp duties, and that's just going to add further pressure to the rental crisis. That's one way to look at this, is that, yeah, you might think it's better for first home buyers, but really, if you're looking at the rental market, the rental pool is diminishing. And for most Australians, their property is their biggest asset. So if property prices go backwards, you're disadvantaging the bulk of the community.
Well, that's right. And I think it gets to this point, which is, well, what's next? So you've got this tax on investors. There's an uncertain investment climate. We know that dozens of new taxes have been brought in by this government. You've got the massive cost overruns of these public infrastructure programs, which is sucking workers and sucking resources out of the private economy into these infrastructure programs. So I think people look at the state of the Victorian economy and they say, well, if they're going to change the rules midway through the game, what are they going to do next?